Welcome back to the HR Connection podcast. I am your host, Sabrina Baker, CEO and founder of Acacia HR Solutions. And today I wanted to highlight the biggest differences between managing human resources in a small environment versus its much larger counterparts. Before I jump into that, let me explain why we say 1 to 500 for small employers. I mentioned in the first episode, if you were able to catch that in that 1 to 500 range, you can have a wide variety of individuals managing human resources. You can have an HR department of one, you can have a CEO who's just kind of winging it, you can have that guy in marketing who was good at putting together an employee event that one time and now suddenly they are the HR person as well. You can have a small HR team if you're on the larger side of that employee population. It can be so very different. Even between two companies that both have around 50 employees, one may have an HR department of one and another one may have no HR. So the vast difference in organizations and how they manage HR under 500 employees is very, very different than in a much larger organization, 500 and above. At the 500 mark, that's where we start to see some very similar structure. If you go and look at just structure, meaning the types of roles, HR roles that are inside of Google and Apple, they're probably pretty similar. It's probably a very similar structure and they have the similar types of roles. Even when you get to the 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees, it's going to be way more standard across industry, across employee population, that you're going to have maybe a director and a manager and a generalist. And it's going to be a little nuanced, but pretty much the same structure for all of those organizations. Where again, under that 500, it's kind of the wild, wild west. It's anybody's guess. So let's talk about some of those major differences. If you're managing human resources in one of those environments, let's see if any of these resonate with you. The first one is the reason that you can have so many different types of people managing HR in a small space, and that is priorities. In a small environment, especially in super small, and especially if we're talking like startup range, series A, B, maybe even into C, you have a different priority set than you do in a much larger organization. If they are in series funding mode, if they are in startup mode, if they are fairly new as a business, their priority might just be getting to profitability. It might just be building up the first product, launching the first product. It is all about getting into the black, figuring out how do we make a profitable organization. Inside of that, the CEO is really going to decide how much of a priority human resources is. This is why we can say that in a 50 employee organization, some organizations are going to have a dedicated HR person and others are not. And it's because the priority of the founder, the priority of that CEO really dictates what the organization is working on. And the biggest priority that they have is getting to profitability. And if they've gotten to profitability, then it's maintaining it. It's maintaining it and scaling upwards to whatever it is that they're trying to do. In a much larger organization, those priorities are different. If you are talking about a public organization, then shareholder are obviously a priority. Shareholder preference, shareholder demands are obviously going to be your bigger priorities, and maybe just maintaining market share, gaining market share, dealing with economy shifts. Those are going to be priorities that are different than in a much smaller space. The next difference, and this one is so obvious, is budgets. Small employers are not bleeding money. They do not have extra thousands of dollars laying around to just do whatever they want or throw money at a problem. Every single dollar counts. Every penny is counted. They have to manage their money in a way that makes sure they can get to profitability, that they can scale as they need to, that they can add employees when that demand is there, that they can buy inventory if that's what they need to do. And so budgets are very limited. There's not a lot of fluff. There's not a lot of extra. Every dollar that is spent needs to be working towards their goal. Obviously, in a much larger counterpart, that's different. You could have a little extra in budgets. There could be way more leeway. It could be easy to throw money at a situation by hiring extra people or whatever it is. But the budget difference is a huge one. And in many of our clients and many small employers, there is no HR budget. There is no employee budget. And anytime that we want to do an HR program, or they even think about investing in our services, it's an investment. It's something that they really have to stop and take time to think about. Is this worth doing? Is this something that I really need? I'm a small employer business owner myself, and this is so true for me. While we are profitable and have been for many years, I still have to think about adding, if I'm going to add a big, big thing in the business that's going to cost a lot of money, I have to really think about that. It's an investment for me, and I have to make sure that it is going to help me reach my goals. And so budget is an obvious one, but it's a huge difference between in small employers and then their larger counterparts. Right along with budgets is resources. In small employers, you often have many people wearing many different hats. I joke all the time about the marketing person or the finance person who, you know, did one good employee event and all of a sudden they are the HR person. But it's not just HR that's added on to other people's jobs. It's all kinds of things. It can be a situation where you come in and you have one role and then suddenly you are doing something completely outside of that, something that you've never ever done, because resources are limited. We only have so much budget that we can hire employees with. And so we got to multitask a little bit. We've got to all learn how to wear multiple hats and do multiple things and manage multiple roles to make sure that the company is getting what they need. Obviously, in a much larger organization, you are not going to have that in specifically in HR. Even just being an HR department of one, let's just say that the person gets to focus just on HR. They're still managing every discipline of HR. I think there's like 9 disciplines under HR. If you think about benefits and payroll and recruiting and performance management, all of these things, that one person has to manage and be an expert in all of that. Where in a much larger organization, you're going to have a team, you're going to have a dedicated recruiter, you might have a dedicated benefits person, somebody managing leaves. It's not a situation in your larger counterparts where anybody in the business is wearing multiple hats. And yet, in a small org, even the CEO is CEO. They might be COO. They might be chief revenue officer. They could be the entire C-suite for a long time because they don't have the budget to hire all of the individual people that they need. Now, here's what I think is cool about that. And I think this is why I love working in small environments. It's because you get to learn so much. I share with my staff all the time that we are not a big business. We are not making tens of millions of dollars every single year where I can throw all of these benefits and great perks at them. But the one thing I know I can give them is learning opportunities. I know even 6 months in my organization a year, they are going to learn so much. And I think working inside of a small environment, you certainly have to be the right type of person. But I think that working inside of a small environment and being able to have the freedom really to jump into many multiple different areas that may be of interest to you, or just something to learn something new. While it can be overwhelming, and of course there's so much to do in a day, it's also kind of fun to get to stretch yourself and think outside the box a little bit and jump right out of your comfort zone, because that's what is needed for everybody to survive inside the business. And so while it is a big difference that people are wearing many hats inside of a small org, I also think it's a really unique challenge that is cool if that's something that you're interested in doing. I spoke in the first episode about small employers feeling like a small town, and man, is that true. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's in everybody's business. You don't even have to gossip in a small employer because you just hear everything. You just kind of know, everybody knows what's going on. People are related to each other. The same person that is flying the plane is also checking the bags and pushing you through security. And so it's very much like that small town feel versus a much larger counterpart where people are just kind of lost in the crowd. They're, you as an HR professional in a large environment, if it's really large environment, you're not going to talk to every employee. You're not going to know every employee. You're certainly not going to know them on a personal level about their family and their kids and, their hobbies and interests outside of work. You are absolutely going to get that in a small environment. It is one of those situations where you get to personalize and kind of customize a relationship with every single person inside the organization. If there's only 20 of you, it's very easy to be close to everybody, to talk to everybody, to know what's going on with everybody. And it certainly presents challenges because, again, everybody's in everybody's business, and you have this closeness that can sometimes feel I don't like to use the word that we're all family, but it can sometimes get that where if you're working really closely together, you become have that relationship where you're really close and almost like fighting with someone, like a brother, like a sister. And that happens in small organizations. It's certainly a challenge, but I also think that as an HR professional, I like being able to know everybody that I'm interacting with. I like being able to know what their hobbies are, what their interests are, get to know their personality so that I can make sure that whatever I'm doing inside of human resources is kind of tailored as much as it can be to them. So while I do think that that small town feel in a small environment can present problems and present challenges, it's another area that I think is kind of cool that you get to have that close working relationship with people and you're in something together, especially if you are in a startup. I love our startup clients because the first 10, 15 hires, they are a part of something. They are building something. They are a part of something really cool. And when we get to come back like 2, 3 years down the road, and some of those same people are there from the beginning, and they kind of reminisce about the beginning days when there was no toilet paper, or there was, beer in the fridge, and now we can't do that because it's a bad idea. There's something about being in that small environment and you're building something, you're working towards something, and that camaraderie that you can't understand that when you go and join an environment that's got 15,000 employees that's been around for decades. You're not going to get that type of camaraderie. So certainly the small town stuff it presents challenges. It 100% does, but I also think it presents, again, unique opportunities to manage HR different in a really fun way. The next biggest difference I see between small employers and large organizations is structure. In a small employer, you're going to have a very flat organization. You could have everybody reporting to the CEO, depending how small you are. You could have just a few managers and everybody reports up to them. But more than likely, you're going to have a very flat structure without a lot of leadership. And the leadership that you have may be homegrown. They may not have had a lot of leadership roles before. And so everybody is just trying to figure out what that looks like. Obviously, in a larger counterpart, you're going to have much more layers, much more structure. You're going to have middle managers, directors, VPs, all the way up. You're going to have all of that, a full C-suite, may even have a board. And so the structure does present some unique opportunities just because you have so many individual contributors, just a few managers who might be trying to figure out their life, and then an executive, a CEO founder who could be the entire C-suite. And so that is a huge difference between managing HR in a small employer and how you navigate all of that than doing it in a much larger organization. I came into this episode with 9 differences between small employer and large org, and we are on number 6, and that is decision making. Your small employers are much quicker. They are much faster. They are able to make decisions quickly because it doesn't have all of the red tape, all of the politics, all of the approval layers that you're going to have in a much larger organization. So even though the decision may more times than not, especially if it's asking for budget or resources, be a no, you're going to get to that answer much faster. And so small orgs who are when they have strong workflows, when they have strong processes like that, they can move very, very quickly because they have a process for presenting whatever it is, figuring out what decision they need to make, and then making it. You may only have one person, the CEO, who is able to make that decision. And so you can definitely see how decision making happens so much faster when you are under 500 employees, and definitely if you are under that 100 mark. Kind of going along with that flexibility, small employers are much more agile. Not that you can't have agility in large orgs, but when you have agility in a large org, it's usually in a team, in a specific department, where in a small employer, the entire organization can be agile. I talk to my team all the time about, look, this is my decision. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go down this path, but I reserve the right to change my mind. And the reality is I'm not necessarily changing my mind. I am just reacting to market conditions or our client needs or whatever it may be, our budget in the moment, something happened unexpectedly. And so we will pivot if we need to. We will pivot very quickly if something's not working for us, or if we need to change course, we will do that. And we can do that because we are a small team and we don't have to get so many people on board to accept the change or to go through this entire change management process when we are trying to change something. I pull together a very quick meeting, we talk about the change, and we go execute the change. So that flexibility and that agility, I think is one of the things that draws a lot of people to small employers, being able to change like that, pivot like that on a dime, make quick decisions. It's exciting to be a part of something like that. It's exciting to not feel like you are stuck in this never ending loop of work that's not working, but yet to change it would take so much work that it never happens. And so everybody's just kind of stuck. Super exciting to be in something that's really flexible. Two more differences between small employers and large organizations. The first one is risk taking. Small employers are typically more willing to take risks. They kind of have to at times. You have to be willing to take some risk. Starting the business in and of itself is a risk. And so founders are often willing to take some risks, again, within the limits of their budget, within the limits of their resources. But they're willing to take a little bit more risks, try something. I know in my business, I have certainly tried something, thrown it out there. It didn't work. So we pull back on it. And it's not seen as a failure. It's not seen as a mistake. It's just seen as something we learned. We tried it and it didn't work. And that's okay. And so I have the ability to take some risks because it's not, if the risk fails, it's not going to be this big social media reputation issue. It's not going to be costly to the level that it could be in a large organization. And so along with kind of that decision-making flexibility, all of that, you have this risk tolerance that is higher in a small employer than it is maybe in a larger organization. And then the last difference, which we've already talked about, but I think it's important to keep highlighting, and we'll probably do that throughout all of the episodes of this podcast, is HR structure. Inside of a small org, you are going to have something that is it's very flexible. Again, anybody could be managing HR. Nobody could be managing HR. It could be just kind of the wild, wild west, everybody figuring it out as they go. Where in a much larger organization, you're going to have almost a rigid structure, almost a structure that is very set and feels very rigid and doesn't have a lot of flexibility to it, in that we've got to have this role, we've got to have this role, we've got to have this role. Where in that small employer, some need dedicated recruiters, some don't need recruiters at all. Some, again, don't have any HR, some do. So the HR structure is a huge difference between small employers and large employers. And that structure can sometimes present a challenge. So there you have it. There are my 9 differences between managing human resources in a small employer versus a large one. Some of them present real challenges. Having a lack of budget, a lack of resources can be very difficult if you are trying to build a scalable HR infrastructure. It can be hard to do that with no money to do it. And you by yourself trying to also manage the day-to-day HR. So I get that the limited budget, the limited resources, those present vast challenges that are really hard to overcome. And I hope that as you continue to listen to this podcast, we give you ideas and suggestions for how to be able to do that. Other challenges that I've presented, like the flexibility, the ability to learn, I think those are unique to small employers, and I think they're positive challenges to have. When I first started the business, I did not have a great HR network. I had not spent any time building an HR network outside of the people that I worked with, and I found that I really needed it when I decided that I was going to jump into this. And so I started reaching out on social media at the time, LinkedIn and Twitter. Back then, Twitter was a great place to be and meet HR people. And I started going to conferences and speaking at conferences. And I found that connecting with other HR pros really challenged the way that I think about human resources. I had been 11 years in corporate environments that were pretty established. They had a structure that was probably almost rigid. And I had just accepted that that's the way HR was. That's how you do HR. And then when I started to meet other HR professionals, and certainly when I started the business, I realized that the traditional way we think about HR doesn't always work. And I believe that small employers inherently offer this opportunity to their HR professionals. They allow you the space and the grace to think differently about how human resources could be managed in an environment with only 20 employees or 150 employees? And how do we do that in a space that is going to scale to a certain level? Or how do we do that in a small business that has been around for 30 years and is never going to grow beyond 60 employees? What do you do there? And so this is one of the reasons, again, why I love small employers, why I love working in such vastly different environments where every single client of ours is so different. And the way that we work with them, the way that we manage human resources is so different. And so as we go through this podcast, I certainly want to give up ideas and suggestions for how to manage the day-to-day stuff. The compliance stuff is super important. We want to make sure that we are legally compliant. We want to make sure that we're handling payroll and those types of things correctly. But I really hope that where you find the value is in the ideas around challenging kind of that status quo of HR, because if you are managing human resources in a 1 to 500, you have a very unique opportunity to think about how you do that very, very differently than your larger counterparts. And that's probably the biggest difference and the coolest difference between managing HR in a small environment and a large one.